Everyone. Everyone, thanks for joining us. We'll get started in just a minute. We're just gonna let a couple of people filter in. I think that we're in the waiting room. Um, we'll go from there.
Should be good.
Well, yeah, let's just get started. I know we don't have a ton of time. We're gonna book about a half hour and then leave about 10 minutes for questions or so. Um, So just to say hello and welcome, and thank you for joining us for another RTDNA webinar. My name is Trevor Koroll. I'm currently a senior producer at the Reuters packaged video team, and I work with RTDNA Canada as a webinar producer. And at the organization, we're trying to bring more value to our members, and this is one of the ways that we're doing that. So we're very happy today to welcome Arshy, Mann, and Jordan Cornish. They worked together for 6 years on the acclaimed documentary series Commons on the Canada Land Network, and they've now launched their own project, The Hatchet. It's a podcast and newsletter focused on exposing power and money in Canada. And with the industry trending towards subscriptions and more individual journalists setting out on their own, we thought, why not talk to a couple of people who are doing just that. So Arshy and Jordan, how is it going?
Oh, it's going pretty good.
I'd say so.
Yeah. I think right now Jordan and I are still kind of in an election hangover. I feel like probably most journalists are right now. And so yeah, we're just kind of getting our bearings and trying to figure out kind of what comes next in terms of our coverage, in terms of the business and all of that. But it's been an exciting time.
That's great. Well, so with the election, I guess what was your experience with the election? I had a different question prepared, but let's just dive right in because it's right there.
I mean, it was good, right? Like just in terms of a business proposition, like we haven't seen audiences as engaged with the news, in a very long time between the Trump stuff, this federal election. And so, for us, that meant that one, there was just a whole bevy of issues for us to cover, places where we thought we could, have an impact or elucidate things in a way that maybe other media wasn't talking about necessarily. And it also meant like pretty decent growth for us in terms of our subscriber base, and the kind of boost that like a pretty young company definitely can use. Things have definitely slowed down in the last 2 weeks. Like it's been kind of funny just watching. Like for a long time we were very happy with the line going up, and now the line is kind of staying the same. And I don't like it when it does that nearly as much, but it's I think from my understanding and of talking to other Substackers and things like that, that this is usually the way things go. You have months where you have like really good growth, and then things are kind of stagnant, maybe, but over time it kind of averages out.
Really interesting. Okay, so what sort of prep did you do before you both decided to, go down this road and launch this project?
Jordan, maybe you want to take this one to start?
I'm smiling because it's a great question. It definitely helps because I feel like Archie and I we had a long working relationship, so we worked on a program together for 6 years, and throughout that kind of got into like a pretty comfortable rhythm of turning around that type of product. So it was like a pretty comprehensive show, right? Like took a lot of planning. All the seasons were fairly complex, like pretty intricate. So like along the way, I feel like we just kind of picked up a lot of skills that became sort of the foundation for us starting our own thing. Um, I guess early, like, sorry, remind me what your question was again. I feel like I'm gonna lose my train of thought thinking about the early days of us. There was just so
Well,
much happening.
yeah, I guess just sort of where, what I don't know, what do you think was the big first step of you preparing? You've maybe had a conversation about this is what we want to do. What's the thing that take us into those early
Mhm.
conversations where you sort of had to make a decision?
We definitely talked a lot about the what we wanted the focus of the thing to be, and because we've covered a lot of different topics together, I think it helped that we know that we both have interests in certain things, like so. power and money was a pretty straightforward place for us to land, I guess. Based on a lot of the stories that we had done before, we generally kind of focused in on on those topics. So that was one of the things I thought it was pretty important for us to make sure that we had like a pretty clear focus right off the top, because it helped us sort of formulate our early messaging, the types of stories we wanted to do right away. We wanted to hit sort of a wide variety of things under that spectrum pretty early on, just so that everyone would kind of get a sense of who we wanted to be in the long term. So I think that helped, was just sort of having like a clear focus, but with enough room that you can kind of show your strengths or your capabilities.
But even before that, Jordan, like before we were deciding on a focus, we had to decide, are we going to do this thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, do we even have, does this make any sense? I mean, we were sitting in my living room doing SWOT analyses on my wall, you know, the like, what is it, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats thing that you often do in like bad strategic sessions at a lot of companies. And like, we were just putting Post-its on the wall and actually trying to figure out, is this feasible? What could we do? What are the things that could really screw us over? What are the things that we actually think we bring to the table? And so I think doing some of that early actual kind of prepared strategic work was really important for us in terms of trying to actually get to somewhere and make sure that this actually made sense. But you know, it was kind of goofy, just
It
like
was goofy, but I felt
like,
really helpful. Like it is
yeah.
certainly the kind of thing that I think a lot of us have had experiences with in these kind of like workplace meetings where you're sort of like, oof, I'm not really sure I'm getting much out of this. But when we did it for ourselves for this, like talking about threats, weaknesses, especially those ones, like you had to be pretty ruthless with ourselves,
Mhm.
which
Becomes
was
very
really
real.
useful. There are
Yeah.
certainly things in that SWOT that that still come to mind for me on the day to day. And one of the things like I remember quite distinctly was like in opportunities, we did talk about the coming federal election, right? Like we did talk about what that would mean for us. So, you know, like and that paid off for us when we got to that stage and we started doing our coverage there on it. So yeah, I found that a really like useful thing, even though I kind of laugh at it now and like look at
Yeah.
our kind of pictures of our sort of exercises, but it was really useful. The other thing I would say is we gave ourselves kind of a hard deadline to launch. I think you can get really bogged down on some of these exercises as well and kind of want to over perfect the thing. So when it comes out, you just can, you know, like you have everything. Um, just give yourself a deadline. I don't know. I found that really helpful for us
Yeah.
to just like you put it out there into the world, right? Like you could spend all day thinking about it, but people can't find you if it never gets published.
Yeah. And there's basically a month and a week maybe from when we left our jobs to when we launched. And I think that was about the right amount of time for us. You know, maybe it'll be a little bit more, a little bit less for other people. But I've seen so many projects die on the vine for a lot of journalists that I know, just because like, you know, journalists we're a weird breed of like perfectionists and also people who require a deadline, right? So I think you really have to, for at least some people, like force yourself into an uncomfortable position in order to actually like get the thing out there and going. You can only like do it by doing it, right? The other thing, just in terms of the launch, I mean, this was just kind of a fun exercise. We had to come up with a name, and so we would literally sit there for like 2 hours just trying to come up with every cool word we could think of in every category. We started out with something like 500 possible names and just narrowed and narrowed and narrowed till we had a list of like 20, and then we just shopped it to every single person we knew, just even strangers at bars and like everything. And that's kind of how we got a consensus on the hatchet, which was not a front runner for
It
us
was
by
not
any
our front
means.
runner. It was
But
honestly, yeah, it was kind of like a last minute one that we threw in that just really started to grow on us. But it was really workshopping it with other people that
yeah,
made it stick.
So what
um, yeah.
so what do you need, I think, before, you know, you've decided to do this? What do you know, in terms of like hard assets and knowing that, you know, you're essentially, you know, trying something new and something for yourself, and sort of what do you need in terms of money, technology, things like that, you know, take us through those sort of details.
We don't have that much. I mean, it's going to be different depending on what sort of project that you're launching, right? If you're doing a mostly print newsletter, you need a laptop. That's basically it. Maybe you could even just do it from your phone, right? For podcasting, we thought a lot about different kinds of options, and frankly, we have a pretty minimal setup. We're working out of again, just my like living room, record in my bedroom. We have a few microphones that fairly high quality, but didn't cost like that much. A very small kind of setup. I have a tiny bit of soundproofing now around my desk in my bedroom. But yeah, maybe Jordan, you're better equipped to talk a little bit about equipment. What am I missing here?
I'll say like yeah, podcasting setup wise, we're doing it right now for about for just under 2,000, maybe a little, somewhere in and around that range, which was like the upfront investment, like so we had to do that, like basically the mic that we got, you can't get for much cheaper than 500. It's sort of industry standard. Eventually, you're gonna have to get it, so we just kind of pulled that trigger pretty early on. But there's a few other things that just sort of add up. Domain names, our emails. I use a audio workstation called Reaper that is one flat rate as opposed to I made that choice because you can buy it outright rather than Adobe, which is a monthly fee. So I those kinds of things come to mind. There's a few audio plugins that I rely on that I had to buy. Those I also get to keep outright, which is nice. It's tough in the world of subscriptions to find those kinds of things, but when you're thinking long term, those really important to me and valuable for me. We pay for a transcription software that also helps with like a scripting platform that's monthly. Things like this are important to kind of keep in mind because they just sort of add up and sneak up on you a little bit in the early days. Although like when it comes to sort of podcasting and blogging, you can do it pretty cheap, right? Like I got some great Black Friday deals. Under 2 grand is not terrible for starting up a podcast shop, I guess. So I think like you can really do a few things with a little bit of money to keep your quality level as good as you can kind of get it, right? Like, and I think that makes a big difference to listeners.
We're at like 90%, I'd say, of our like audio quality that we had working in like a proper professional studio.
Yeah.
And we're doing that with less than 2,000. Like it's amazing what you can just kind of like jerry rig together. And so the barriers to entry there, I think, are actually like quite low. It's not exactly the same as the studio, but like my God, 90% of listeners will not be able to tell the difference.
So in our as we were preparing for this discussion, we talked a bit about operating at a loss and sort of, you know, that maybe generates some fear for a lot of people, and you sort of like, how am I going to get out of it? But sort of, how are you managing that sort of weight, and how even your mental health wise, how are you managing that?
Well, I feel like it's super important to note, and Arshy's going to be able to talk better about this, but I'll just say, like, like there's no way that we do this if we didn't have 6 years of salary jobs, like we were able to put away enough to start. So that really helps. But I do think like the having some money to start up with is an important and sort of like under talked about side of
Yeah.
this. And I know that that's something that you think about, Arshy.
Yeah, you're going to, I think, in any circumstance where you're starting up your own thing, unless you have like you're actually straight up famous, like you're going to have to build from zero. And so it means that you will be operating a loss. You'll have to fund your own kind of life in the meantime. And that means for us, we've saved up money. I've been borrowing money from like my grandma. I've been trying to find ways to minimize costs on our end and make sure that we're as kind of frugal with the business as we can be. And again, like we will not have an office, right? Like I think that's a really important thing is to try to do this as be as realistic about how much money you have to work with as you can be. But within a month, 2 months, we were able to figure out that this is going to work. That we can see the projections, the trajectory, that there is pickup on it. And there's a lot of upside there. You know, we were not making great salaries in our previous job, even though we were quite experienced. And I think that's something that a lot of journalists probably experience because our industry is collapsing, right? But
Yeah.
now there's upside at the end of it for us if we keep kind of working towards it. So that helps. I think in terms of say like the mental health kind of it all. But yeah, I do have, you know, somewhat of a support system, right? Like I don't come from like a rich family or anything like that, but you know, my mom probably has enough money somewhere if like everything goes to shit that I can at least like borrow, and I have other, you know, people in my life I can depend on in the short term. I think it would be harder if I had, you know, mortgage, kids, that kind of thing, for
Definitely.
sure. But you can still plan ahead, save ahead. I mean, and also I think when it comes to you know, if you for people who might take a buyout or something like that, that's great starting capital if you do want to do something on your own. But yeah, you have to be realistic that it's probably not going to be making money right away. But to tell you the truth, we've been able to make a decent amount so far. We've made something like $40,000 in the last 6 months, I'd say. That's not so bad, right? Like that's basically funding our lives right now for the most part. So we have about 460 paid supporters, and some of it is obviously like people coming from Canada Land who were supporting us in the past. There, we built up a little bit of an audience, but also some of it is just is new people finding us too. I think there people are willing to pay for news. Yeah, at this time, if you give them a product that they feel is valuable. So yeah, it's I think you have to be realistic, but it is possible. What shocked us really is how few people like so we're on Substack. Like there's a lot of people paying for it. There's very few Canadian news people on Substack who are really trying to make a go of it. It feels like it's
Hmm.
early days there still. We thought we were getting in late, and I'm very convinced that we're early now. Just looking at the kind of growth and some of the people who are there who are making a pretty decent living off of it. So I do think that there's yeah a pretty open door there if you want to try to do something new. I mean, maybe we can talk about like what we think kind of works and what doesn't,
Yeah, yeah,
because I
go,
do
yeah,
think that there's
For
absolutely.
sure.
lots of pitfalls. You know, I think we're because we had a little bit of a pre-established audience who we could kind of bring with us, that allows us, I think, to be a little broader in what we cover, right? Like we're not necessarily covering a beat. We're more, you know, providing a certain kind of like style of podcast or something like that. That's kind of our proposition. But I think there's a real opportunity for like beat writers out there. Look at like Matt Elliott, what he's doing at City Hall Watcher. I think he's built up a great audience by really just like focusing in on the minutia of City Hall coverage. And I think you could do something similar for so many different places. There's a guy in Fredericton who just does the local news there. He's like does quite well on Substack independently. There's a lot of people who cover, you know, technology or certain aspects of finance or energy or whatever it may be. So I think that's something to think about. The other thing that I've been thinking about a lot is it was a smart decision on our part, I think, to brand ourselves as almost an
Yeah.
organization, right? Maybe you want to talk about that, Jordan.
Yeah, I think just kind of like compounding on some of what you said there. When folks are, showing kind of like their willingness to go to Substack and, spend their money on people, it like, and I do think that we are early. It can be like, maybe a little daunting or can get there. I've heard sort of like American audiences say this, that like you're spending kind of $10 here, $10 there across like multiple Substacks that you want to support. So for us, like we're just kind of two minds about it. One, which I was just kind of getting to, and the other is like a parasocial side, which I'll explain as well, about kind of broadening it out so that we're more styled as a publication rather than sort of like around us as people is one. So like we can function in that way, right? So like we'll commission feature like pieces from reporters. We can have guest hosts. We can, and those things won't be jarring for people, but we feel a bit more like a publication. So hopefully that like $11, which is maybe like a little bit more than you might pay for one person, feels like it's getting stretched a bit. And you can expect kind of more from us there, which was always kind of the plan for us. And then I guess maybe actually you might be best to talk about sort of like the relationship as a host with an audience and why you might want to be the hatchet rather than the Arshy Mann show.
Yeah, I mean, it gives you a little bit of insulation, I think, as well. Like people can put different ideas onto a brand as opposed to a person. Um, if you're Paul Wells, I think it makes a lot of sense to be Paul Wells on Substack, but like most of us aren't Paul Wells, and so it's I think it gives the impression of being kind of a more fulsome operation, and also you know. I, I don't know, feels harder to be like canceled for saying something stupid, if that makes sense, Like,
Definitely also a little aspirational. Like let's
yeah,
be a little real here. Like where Arshy and I do have goals.
yeah, exactly. Um, but yeah, it allows you to convey the idea of what you want to do, I think, a little easier than just being like, I'm a reporter, here's what I do, right? So that I think can be helpful and might be something to think about if someone's branching out on their own. Like the branding and the way you present yourself, I do think is very important.
So in terms of, setting that subscription price, you
Yeah.
talked about it a little bit, but sort of, what was the mindset behind sort of what you guys are asking for? And did you, do you have any, it's kind of seems weird to me to put a dollar figure on my content, but it's sort of, take us through sort of those conversations, because anybody, going into independent, starting a Substack will have to sort of do the same thing.
I think your thing was pretty straightforward. It's the minimum is $5, right? And so it's like, well, there's two of us, so $5 each, and then the $1 is what goes to Substack. So we set it at 11.
Yeah,
I
basically
think
the lowest rate we could at that logic.
Yeah, and I think it's better to price your subscription a little bit higher unless you're pretty confident you can attract a mass audience right out the gate. It makes a big difference in terms of your revenue, and I don't think people seem to think $11 is fair. We're providing 1 to 2 podcasts kind of a week, sometimes like documentary style, sometimes just interview things. Most of it is not behind a paywall, but we are starting to paywall more and more stuff. But it's usually more of our like chat show kind of things where it's like people who really value the parasocial relationship they might have with us, or little extra bonuses. I think that's the hardest part, is less the pricing for me and more determining what we want out in the public completely without a paywall, because we want our reporting to have as many people, listening to it and reading it, and have as big of an impact as we can, but we also got to get paid. And so that I find to be a more difficult kind of thing to navigate.
Do you miss at all the a quote unquote 9 to 5 salaried position?
I miss
No.
having an office, but otherwise,
uh,
no. Like I'm going a little stir crazy over the winter because for us we've been like working out of my place, and so like I don't leave. I feel like I need to go like get some exercise and like see sunshine every once in a while. That's an issue. But I think what can be daunting for some people is like, well, you're just kind of doing it on your own. And I don't think Jordan and I feel that way because we at
yeah.
least have each other, right? We're
So
doing
what
this
was
together.
daunting and different from this experience that to our last was sort of maybe at the early days of just sort of like the absolute openness of it all, when we were
Yeah.
just like, we could do anything, like we could do anything with this project. This is ours. We have a million and one ideas, right? So like narrowing that, being realistic, kind of like all of those things, where I think probably I almost had a bit of like decision paralysis in the beginning there, because it was like, what do we do? Where do we go? There's like what to start with, right? So figuring out how to prioritize that stuff was a useful kind of period. But that was also like very much learned by doing, I think, in those early months.
Absolutely. But yeah, I don't, we're more efficient now, I think, right? Like
Yeah.
just, and this isn't like throwing shade at any former employers, but just when you have multiple layers of managers, when you have all of these other kind of corporate tasks that you have to take care of, it takes up a lot of your time. And so, like, yes, we do have to worry now about running our own business and doing our own promotions and like all of these other things that we didn't have to in the past. There's also a whole suite of things that we don't have to worry about anymore. And that does mean the responsibility is on us, right? But it's, I don't know. It's been a relief. I've been happier than I've ever been in a work environment, to tell you the truth. It feels great. And like, sure, there's some stress and maybe this whole thing will fall apart, but the doing of it is actually fun. And yeah, I feel less stressed than I felt in a very long time, which is not what I expected, to tell you the truth.
And it really does help that I think people have been really kind and generous with us and have really met us where we've been can't be grateful enough for that.
Absolutely.
That's good. Well, we're nearing the end. And if there's anyone in the audience who has any questions, please put them into the chat, and I will read them out, and we'll get to it. I guess one of my last questions really is just sort of, I I had it when I started talking and then totally lost it. But sort of, what? Yes. Okay. So you had your plan. You laid things out. Are you
Mhm.
are you where you expected you would be at this point in time?
I did not have expectations. I think that was a big part of going into it. I really went field of dreams on this and kind of hoped like if we build it, they will come, but like you'd never really know. And I think just to keep myself sane, I like had really no expectations, just kind of wanted to do the best with what we got and make it work. Like I believed in the idea. Like that was really a part of it. I thought that we could make it work. But like, I didn't know how it was going to go initially, if we were going to have to pivot, change things, what have you. And I was kind of ready for that. But I'm really happy with where we are right now, actually, to answer that part of your question.
Yeah, we talked about, okay, at a certain point, we're going to have to evaluate whether or not we have to go take part-time jobs, right? And that this
Yeah.
becomes something that we have to navigate with that. Will we have enough money? And like the answer is yes, we do. And so yeah, this is what I wanted. I just want to be able to make a living doing the kind of work that I care about. And I think so many journalists feel that way, right? And so right now we're able to do that. The growth is still there. I think we'll continue to be able to do that, and we might actually even be able to invest more in our own kind of journalism. With some of the projections that we have, like we're hopeful in 2, 3 years, something like that, we'll have something for a travel budget, so we can actually go report stories from the field. We'll be able to maybe get more writers, more people as freelancers doing pieces for us that we think are important. So yeah, I'm feeling good about it. It feels like a success to me so far. Again, everything could fall apart at any moment, but like it's the media industry. We're used to that feeling, right?
So we have a question from Lori Ward. Can you shed some light on how you are getting new subscribers?
A lot of it is organic through Substack. So Substack, compared to some of the other newsletter platforms like Ghost or Beehive, has I think a pretty robust community of people there. And the way it often works is like you can, different publications can recommend other ones, right? So say for instance, like Justin Ling recommends The Hatchet in his thing, and we do for him too. So when you subscribe to his, Substack will automatically ask you, do you want to subscribe to just five publications Justin Ling recommends as well? A lot of people just click yes. And so then all of a sudden they're on our list. They're not paying yet. Then that gives us an opportunity to prove that this is something worth paying for. So that's a pretty huge one. I think a lot of people, like I said, followed us from Canada Land. A lot of it is me pestering people I come across in real life. I can't show you because my phone is how I'm recording this right now, but the lock screen on my phone is literally a QR code to sign up. So when I'm having a conversation with somebody and I tell them what we do, I can be like, and you can sign up here. Like you have to be kind of like an annoying hustle bro a tiny bit, right? But frankly, we haven't invested much in promotion yet,
Yeah.
like at all. We're very bad at social media, I think, Jordan and I. And so we're that's one of the next steps is like figuring out an actual promotion strategy because we haven't. But the fact we're able to get almost 500 paid people without doing much promotion, I think speaks to the hunger for this kind of stuff out there.
And I think like the effectiveness of that kind of like brand like or person to person like journalist to journalist or however you want to call it, like in podcasting we call it swaps, which was also like always just a really effective. Everybody knew that this was one of the best ways to kind of get fresh ears on a podcast. We had someone shut us out fairly early on in an episode. We saw a big increase in supporters
Oh
or
yeah,
in
Christy Lee,
numbers from
Canadian
that.
True Crime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those kinds of things, like, again, like without very much social media, with basically no social media, no marketing, it was kind of just like insular community stuff that really made the difference. And you shut them, like, you shut them back out yourselves as well. Because a lot of people have, a lot of these audiences have a lot of overlap.
I'd say Reddit has also been somewhat
Oh,
useful
yeah.
for us. That's one place where I've seen actual like people engage from us, but I don't know, like Blue Sky or Twitter, like not really. Obviously, you can't really advertise on Facebook. Like, there's limited avenues now, but the internal community at Substack is like a pretty good one. So,
Mhm.
Lori had a follow-up and asked, what about advertisement? Is that an option? I think you kind of touched on that, but have you thought about it at all?
We thought about it, but I
yeah,
don't think it's for
I
us.
just don't. Yeah, I just don't know how effective it would be. I'm sure there are ways for it to be effective. I just don't know how to do it properly. I don't want to spend money that could be better spent on something else quite
Exactly.
yet. We're in the process of possibly getting an investment from somebody. And if that does come through, I think we would probably put some of that towards advertising and promotion. But it's not something we've tried yet in terms of actual like paid ads. Where the other thing is, we haven't done this quite yet, but there is we want to try to pursue better placement in things like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music. We had some initial conversations. We're kind of like still tweaking our branding a little. Once we get our art completely down, we're probably going to go kind of whole hog on that. But yeah, in terms of paid ads, I think we'll probably end up experimenting a little at the margins. If we can see a benefit, we'll invest money into it. But otherwise, I'm a little skeptical, to tell you the truth.
Um, Lori, sorry, Lori's
Yeah.
clarified her first question, and I'll get to the next one as well. But just sort of, have you thought about selling ad space on the
Oh, I see.
podcast?
No, we don't want to. It's a
Yeah.
pain in the ass. It's a
Right.
Yeah.
massive pain in the ass. And like the money is not worth it. I'll tell you that right now. Unless you have a massive audience, an American-sized audience, right? Like you are just not going to make up enough money that will justify having to do all of the bullshit that comes along with having to deal with these advertisers, right? CPMs have been dropping all across the board. Podcast advertising is not what it used to be, and I think
Yeah.
audiences are like really annoyed with the amount of podcast ads that you get. And so for us, having an ad-free podcast is part of the pitch, and it just doesn't make sense. Jordan, you dealt with a lot of the ad side, so maybe you can
Oh
talk.
gosh, I mean, like, like everything you said and more of when it comes to sort of advertising, it also just eats into a ton of time as a producer, like kind of like the sole producer at this company, like the only person kind of cutting tape. That's hours gone. What I could be doing stuff for the actual show, which I would never sacrifice. Another thing is once you start with advertisers, they sort of own your schedule, right? Like there is there's definitely stuff you have to agree to around when things come out and how and all that, and I we're a small lean operation right now that needs to be able to be flexible, pivot, work kind of when and how we can. I wouldn't give up that schedule flexibility for anything. I think that's a big contributor to our sort of success and our fairly fine mental health as well.
Yeah.
So I just don't think we would I mean, we're not interested in doing any of that right now.
All right,
And I hated doing ads when I
Yeah.
was at Candlelight. Like I just it fundamentally like hurts me as a journalist to have to read out ad copy. I was willing to do it. It was good. I was glad the advertisers were giving us money, but it's just it makes me feel gross. So if I can avoid it, I'm glad that we get to.
Okay, we have two more questions here, and I think we'll
Yeah.
probably be at time. So I apologize if I am
Oh,
saying your name incorrectly. Nuseba Zen, I'm going to say that, wants to know what type of news does well on Substack in terms of paid subscribers?
All over the place, right? So I think historically what it was kind of like right wing rage bait was definitely like a thing that did well. And in recent, like in the last little bit, it's kind of turned the opposite way. It's like resistance posting, like very kind of like center left, anti Trump, anti Polyev kind of things do well. But like if you're a serious journalist, you're not going to be chasing either of those. I think what does like well enough is good journalism that isn't necessarily out there otherwise. I'd say voicier stuff definitely does better. You're going to get less kind of straight, CP kind of style copy. So I think having a perspective, having a voice definitely helps. But it can be all kinds of things. I mean, some of the most successful like Substacks that are kind of news focused, I'd say are focused. Like the focus, I think, matters quite a bit. People need to
yeah, like the
know
big,
what they can
like the
get
tech
from it.
ones kind of come to mind to me. Like, like
Hmm.
those ones are pretty successful. But I also feel like a little, not to be like a little like bleeding heart about it, but like also if you're passionate about it, like that's like
Hmm.
your thing. Like you might just kind of meet you there, right? I wouldn't worry too much about like I'm not sure if this is what you meant by that question, and probably not, but like don't try to like get your audience like kind of game your audience by picking topics you think are going to be like the palatable thing. Like you can play that game forever. It's just never it's a death spiral for sure.
Like what I would love to see, I think, say an immigration focused like news Substack,
Yeah,
the Canadian immigration would do phenomenally,
yeah,
right?
for
Just
sure.
a reporter covering the immigration beat, similar to something say like what Nick Kung does at the Toronto Star, but like take it independent, do it on Substack. Like there's a huge hunger for that out there, very little information, but
Labor.
yeah, labor I think would do phenomenal. A lot of the finance and businessy things are kind of done, but like some of the most successful Substacks I see, there's one like construction physics, it's called, which is just about like how things get built, and it's looking at different studies, and it's looking at like issues in that area. It's very niche, and like tens of thousands of people, right? Like you could do defense. I think would be another like just
Yeah.
great area. I think having a beat, right? Having a beat is what's going to distinguish you. If you're not finding initial uptake, maybe your beat's a tiny bit too narrow, you can broaden it or maybe get more specific, but like um really identifying like what you're going to be covering, building up stories and an audience on that, I think is the way to go.
And for
Um,
our last question, sort of more of a generalist journalism question from Finn Dermo. As a current journalism student, I'm a bit nervous about entering the media industry when there are so many different paths to take. How did you figure out what you wanted to do?
I mean, I applied to everything and like got what I got. My route into the media industry is mostly through kind of alternative press, but like, I did student journalism for a few years, like at the student paper, then got into, 4-month contract at the Toronto Star, 8 months at Canadian Business Magazine, 6 months at Canadian Lawyer, and then they fired me because I was frankly pretty bad at that one. Mostly because the commute was an hour and a half. I'm sorry, you can't be a lawyer magazine and have your offices in Scarborough. That makes no sense. So I should have been working with you at the Reuters building downtown. And then it was Extra, the LGBT publication for 3 years. But like those were just the jobs that said yes to me. I applied to everything. So what I would say is keep an open mind is the best thing. Trade publications can be great, right? Like no one's too good for that kind of work, especially when you're starting out in your career. Um, and you don't necessarily know the kind of work that's going to appeal to you. I never expected to be so focused on kind of business, like being a business reporter, and like that is really just now one of my passions because of the kind of work that I did before. I mean, Jordan had an entirely different kind of path of just like other shitty-ish jobs, right?
For sure. I'll say I feel like I definitely benefited, and I don't know if this even works for people anymore, probably doesn't, from having like a focus on production. Like I spent kind of the latter half of my uh journalism degree kind of focusing on podcast and radio, and had a bit of a portfolio of stuff on that side. I worked my way through university, so I wasn't doing much freelance or anything like that, but I had a few projects that I thought were strong and kicked those around. Did some time did a story at the Toronto Star that with the investigative team there. That was great. Worked at a content mill, which was garbage for a year, because
Dipley.
I really need the money. I'm sorry, everyone. And that was at least a bit of a masterclass in working like a dog for a company that pays you nothing. But it was useful, beneficial to me to kind of have like a production skill set that I could bring to the table. I think that was a big part of the reason why I was able to get the job at Candyland and pitching. Like you've got to be able to like do all that kind of stuff. But like maybe what helped kind of at least set me apart like a little bit fresh out of school was that I was able to kind of like put some of that stuff together. I don't really know. It was a while ago now. But yeah, it's tough out there. Good luck.
Yeah, it's tough. I would say like do some stuff on your own as well as pursue jobs, right? Like that's the kind of ideal mix. Do as much as you can.
Also, journalists are really generous. I would say reach out to
Yeah.
people as well. This is just something I don't feel like enough young people are taking like advantage of. I was really lucky that I got to work in a newsroom like Candyland. There was, a lot of older folks there who were are people who had more experience in journalism than me, who were willing to sit all night with me if I wanted to, and watch them work or learn or whatever. Lots and lots of journalists are like this and are totally willing to give you to have a cup of coffee with you or take your call. If you won't know if you unless you try on some of those ones.
Yeah, the superpower of being a journalist is that you can just kind of call anyone and
Yeah.
half the time they'll say yes and give you your time. Use that in your career as well. I mean, don't be like so annoying and like beg people for jobs, but definitely take people, for advice, for all kinds of things. Like it can be so useful. And I definitely always say yes to when people reach out to me, right? So
All right, well, let's leave it there. Thank you two very much for joining us this afternoon, and for the candid discussion about how your project is going, the Hatchet. It was
and also
great.
subscribe,
Yeah,
you people out there. Do
he's
it.
gonna leave
It's
a little
great.
bit of space for the plug. You always got
Yeah.
we gotta do something. Okay, well, thanks very much, and thanks everyone for joining us. And thanks for your questions. It was fantastic. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks so
you.
much. This was fun.
Bye.